Sir, I'm going to need you to step back to economy. Now. The flight attendant's voice cut through the boarding area like a knife. Her name tag read Patricia Holbrook, and her face was twisted into a sneer that made every passenger within earshot turn and stare. Xavier Coleman stood frozen in the first-class aisle, his boarding pass clutched in his hand, his carry-on bag halfway into the overhead compartment. "Excuse me." Xavier's voice was calm, but you could hear the confusion underneath. "There must be some mistake. This is my seat, 12A. Before we dive in, tell us where you're watching from in the comments section below." Patricia's eyes narrowed. She crossed her arms, blocking the aisle completely. "I don't think so. First class is for actual first-class passengers. You need to go back where you belong." The cabin went silent. 20 pairs of eyes locked onto Xavier. Some passengers looked away uncomfortably. Others pulled out their phones. One elderly white woman in 12C clutched her purse a little tighter. Xavier felt heat crawling up his neck. He'd been through a lot in his 42 years, but this was different. This was public. This was designed to humiliate. "Ma'am, I have my boarding pass right here." He held it up, keeping his voice steady even though his heart was hammering. "Seat 12A. First class. Paid in full." Patricia didn't even look at it. "Those can be faked. I've seen it before. People like you," she paused, letting the words hang in the air like poison, "try to sneak into first class all the time. Now, I'm asking you nicely. Move to the back before I call security. People like you." Those 4 words detonated in Xavier's chest. Around him, passengers shifted uncomfortably. A businessman in 11D suddenly became very interested in his laptop. A young couple in 13A pretended to be asleep. Nobody said a word. Xavier took a slow breath. "I'd like to speak to the captain." Patricia laughed, actually laughed, a sharp, mocking sound that echoed through the cabin. "The captain doesn't have time for this nonsense. Security, however, does. Last chance, sir. Walk back to economy on your own, or get escorted off this plane in handcuffs. Your choice." Xavier's jaw tightened. He'd built his life on staying calm, staying professional, staying 10 steps ahead. But right now, standing in this airplane aisle with dozens of strangers watching his humiliation like it was entertainment, something inside him shifted. He reached into his jacket pocket, never breaking eye contact with Patricia. "One call," he said quietly. "Give me one call, and we'll see who's leaving this plane." Patricia rolled her eyes. "Oh, here we go. What are you going to do? Call your lawyer? Call the NAACP? Call Jesse Jackson?" She laughed again, louder this time, playing to the crowd. "Make your little call, sir. It won't change anything. You're not staying here." Xavier pulled out his phone. His hands were steady now. Completely steady. He scrolled through his contacts, found the name he was looking for, and hit dial. The phone rang once. Twice. Patricia tapped her foot impatiently, her arms still crossed, her face radiating smug satisfaction. She'd done this before, Xavier realized. Maybe not exactly this, but something close. She'd learned she could get away with it. She'd learned that people like him would eventually back down, swallow their pride, shuffle to the back of the plane and post angry tweets that nobody in power would read. Not today. "Xavier." The voice on the other end was professional, crisp, and immediately alert. "Everything okay?" "Not exactly," Xavier said, his voice carrying through the silent cabin. "I'm on Flight 447 to Chicago. Gate 23. And I'm being removed from my first-class seat by a flight attendant named Patricia Holbrook, who seems to think my boarding pass is fake and that I don't belong here." There was a pause. A long pause. Xavier could almost hear the gears turning on the other end of the line. "Say that again slowly," the voice said, and now there was an edge to it. A dangerous edge. Xavier repeated himself, word for word, his eyes locked on Patricia's face. He watched her smugness begin to crack, just slightly, as she realized this wasn't going the way she'd expected. "Is the cabin door closed?" the voice asked. "Not yet. Keep it that way. Don't hang up. I'm making another call right now." Patricia's confidence wavered. Who are you calling? For the first time, doubt crept into her voice. Xavier didn't answer. He didn't need to. 30 seconds later, the intercom crackled to life. Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. I need all passengers to deplane immediately. This flight has been delayed indefinitely. Please gather your belongings and return to the terminal. Flight attendants, I need to see you in the cockpit. Now. The voice was female, authoritative, and absolutely done with whatever was happening in her aircraft. Patricia's face went white. That's Captain Carter. Why would she? The phone in Xavier's hand buzzed. A text message appeared on the screen. I'm on my way down. Don't move. Xavier slipped his phone back into his pocket. He looked at Patricia, really looked at her, and saw the exact moment she understood that she'd made a catastrophic mistake. Ma'am, he said softly, I think you should probably head to the cockpit like the captain asked. Patricia opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. No words came out. Behind Xavier, passengers were standing, confused and annoyed, grabbing their bags and filing back toward the exit. The businessman from 11D shot Patricia a disgusted look as he passed. The elderly woman from 12C, the one who'd clutched her purse, stopped next to Xavier. I saw everything, she said quietly. That was disgraceful. Absolutely disgraceful. Xavier nodded his thanks, but his eyes never left Patricia. Through the cockpit door, Captain Elena Carter emerged. She was tall, maybe 5'10", with silver-streaked dark hair pulled back in a tight bun. She wore her uniform like armor, every crease sharp, every button gleaming. But it was her eyes that commanded attention, dark, intelligent, and currently burning with barely contained fury. She walked straight past Patricia without even glancing at her. Mr. Coleman, she asked. Yes, ma'am. Elena extended her hand. Xavier shook it, feeling the strength in her grip. I'm Captain Carter. I believe we have a significant problem to address. She finally turned to Patricia, and the temperature in the cabin seemed to drop 10 degrees. Ms. Holbrook. Cockpit. Now. Patricia's voice came out as a squeak. Captain, I was just following protocol. The cockpit, Elena repeated, her voice like steel wrapped in ice. Is not a request. Patricia stumbled toward the front of the plane. Her earlier confidence completely evaporated. Elena turned back to Xavier. Mr. Coleman, I'm going to need you to wait in the terminal for a few minutes while I handle this situation. But I want you to know, she paused, and her voice softened just slightly, what happened to you just now will have consequences. Serious consequences. Xavier nodded slowly. Captain Carter, how did you know to? She held up a hand, cutting him off gently. Let's just say you have friends in high places who don't tolerate this kind of behavior. Not on my aircraft. Not anywhere. She glanced at her watch. Give me 15 minutes. Then we'll talk about getting you to Chicago properly. As Xavier walked back down the jetway, he could hear raised voices from the cockpit. Patricia's protests. Elena's cold, measured responses. The sound of a career imploding in real time. In the terminal, his phone buzzed again. Another text from the same number. Andrews is sending someone. Should be there in 10 minutes. Stay visible. Xavier leaned against a window, watching planes taxi across the tarmac, trying to process what had just happened. His hands were shaking now, the adrenaline catching up with him. He'd been humiliated in front of strangers. Accused. Dismissed. Treated like a criminal for the crime of existing in a space someone else thought he didn't belong. But something was happening. Something bigger than he'd expected. He pulled out his phone and opened his contacts, staring at the name he'd called Major General Patricia Andrews, USAF Ret. His sister, who also happened to be on the Andrews Air Force Base Board of Directors, who also happened to be best friends with the CEO of the airline. Xavier allowed himself a small smile. Patricia Holbrook had picked the wrong black man to humiliate. Behind him, a voice spoke up. "Excuse me, are you Xavier Coleman?" He turned to find a woman in a sharp business suit, holding a tablet and looking extremely apologetic. "I'm Jennifer Walsh, Regional Operations Manager for the airline. I understand we have a serious situation that needs immediate attention. Can we talk?" Xavier looked past her toward the gate, where he could see uniformed airport security gathering, their radios crackling with urgent chatter. "Yeah," he said quietly. "We can talk." What Xavier didn't know yet was that his sister hadn't just made one call. She'd made 5. And in the next hour, this airport would see something it had never seen before, a complete reckoning that would expose not just one flight attendant's racism, but an entire system's failure. The plane sat empty at the gate, passengers scattered throughout the terminal, confused and angry. Captain Elena Carter stood in her cockpit, staring at Patricia Holbrook, her voice low and deadly serious. "Do you have any idea," Elena said slowly, "who you just tried to remove from my aircraft?" Patricia's face was pale, sweat beading on her forehead. He looked suspicious. "He looked black," Elena interrupted. "That's what you mean. Say it." The silence stretched out like broken glass. Elena picked up her radio. "Tower, this is Carter. We have a Code 7 incident. I need airport management, security, and an FAA rep at Gate 23. Immediately." Patricia's legs nearly gave out. "Captain, please, I made a mistake." "Yes," Elena agreed, her voice arctic. "You did. And now you're going to watch exactly what happens when someone makes that particular mistake on my watch." Through the window, Xavier could see more people arriving at the gate. Men and women in suits. Security personnel. Someone with an FAA badge. His phone buzzed one more time. "They're shutting down the entire concourse. Buckle up, little brother. This is going to get interesting." Xavier looked up at the departure board. Every flight at every gate in this section showed the same word, delayed. One call later, he'd done exactly what his sister had promised. He'd shut down the airport. And this was only the beginning. Hit subscribe if you believe people like Xavier deserve respect. Because what happens next? Let's just say some people in power are about to learn a very expensive lesson about treating passengers like second-class citizens. Only the people who think this behavior is acceptable would skip that subscribe button. Don't be one of them. Jennifer Walsh led Xavier to a private conference room near Gate 23, her heels clicking urgently against the polished floor. Through the terminal windows, Xavier could see the chaos unfolding. Passengers crowding around departure boards, airline employees speaking frantically into radios, security personnel cordoning off the entire concourse. "Mr. Coleman, I cannot apologize enough for what you experienced," Jennifer said, closing the door behind them. Her hands were shaking slightly as she set down her tablet. "I've been with this airline for 16 years, and I have never been more ashamed of." Xavier held up a hand. "Ms. Walsh, I appreciate the apology. But I need you to understand something." He sat down, his voice calm but his eyes hard. "This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't a misunderstanding. That woman looked at me and decided I didn't belong in first class because of the color of my skin. She said, 'People like you, try to sneak into first class.' She threatened me with handcuffs in front of a cabin full of witnesses." Jennifer's face crumpled. "I know. I've already reviewed the preliminary reports from 3 passengers who filed complaints. Mr. Coleman, Patricia Holbrook's employment is being terminated effective immediately. We're also conducting a full investigation into..." "Into what?" Xavier leaned forward. "Into whether she's done this before. Into how many other black passengers she's humiliated. Into why your company's training didn't prevent this." The door opened suddenly. A tall man in an expensive suit walked in, followed by 2 more people, a woman with an FAA badge and a younger man carrying a briefcase that practically screamed, "Corporate Legal." "Mr. Coleman, I'm Robert Dawson, Vice President of Customer Relations for the airline." He extended his hand. Xavier looked at it for a long moment before shaking it. "I flew in from our headquarters the moment I heard. I want you to know that we are treating this with the utmost seriousness." "Good," Xavier said flatly. "Because my sister is treating it with the utmost seriousness too. And trust me, when Major General Andrews treats something seriously, people pay attention." The color drained from Dawson's face. "Your sister is Patricia Andrews? The Patricia Andrews who sits on the board of..." "Yes." The word hung in the air like a bomb. The FAA representative, a sharp-eyed woman named Carol Mendez, stepped forward. "Mr. Coleman, I'm here to document this incident for federal review. Discrimination on the basis of race aboard an aircraft is a violation of multiple federal statutes. I need to ask you some questions, and I need to be very clear. Anything you tell me goes into an official report." Xavier nodded. "Ask away." For the next 20 minutes, Xavier recounted every detail. Patricia's sneer. Her words. The way other passengers had reacted. The humiliation of standing there while strangers decided whether to speak up or look away. Carol Mendez's expression grew darker with each sentence. "Did anyone defend you?" she asked. "One woman, after everything went down, said what happened was disgraceful. And before that..." Xavier shook his head. "Before that..." Silence. 20 people watched it happen, and nobody said a word until the captain got involved. Carol made a note on her tablet. "That's what I was afraid of." Meanwhile, back at Gate 23, Captain Elena Carter was conducting her own interrogation. Patricia Holbrook sat in a chair, no longer the confident enforcer who'd tried to remove Xavier. Now she looked small, scared, cornered. "Walk me through your thought process," Elena said, her voice deceptively gentle. "When Mr. Coleman boarded, what made you think he didn't belong in first class?" Patricia's eyes darted around the room. 2 airport security officers stood by the door. The gate agent who'd processed Xavier's boarding pass sat in the corner, her face pale. An airline supervisor named Marcus Bennett stood next to Elena, arms crossed, jaw tight. I just had a feeling," Patricia stammered. "Sometimes you can tell when something's not right," Elena interrupted. "His clothing, his demeanor, his luggage. Or was it his skin color, Patricia?" That's not. "Because here's what I know," Elena continued, pulling out her phone and reading from it. "Xavier Coleman, age 42, Lieutenant Colonel in the United States Army Reserve. Served 2 tours in Afghanistan. Currently works as a senior defense contractor. Has gold status with our airline, meaning he flies with us at least 50 times a year. Has never had a single incident report filed against him. His ticket for today's flight? Purchased 6 weeks ago. First class. Fully paid. Confirmation number verified by our gate agent before he even stepped on my aircraft." Patricia's face went from pale to gray. "So I'll ask you again," Elena said, leaning forward. "What feeling told you he didn't belong?" The silence was deafening. Marcus Bennett spoke up, his voice disgusted. "Captain Carter, we pulled the records. This is Patricia's 4th incident complaint this year. 4th. All involving passengers of color. We've had her in remedial training twice." Elena's eyes widened. 4 times? And she's still flying? "Previous management thought counseling would be sufficient," Marcus said bitterly. "I started as supervisor 3 weeks ago. If I'd known..." "She should have been grounded after the first complaint," Elena snapped. She turned back to Patricia. 4 passengers. 4 human beings treated like criminals for having the audacity to sit in seats they paid for. How many others didn't file complaints, Patricia? How many just swallowed their humiliation and stayed quiet because they were tired, or scared, or didn't think anyone would believe them? Patricia started crying. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean..." "Yes, you did." Elena's voice was ice. "You meant every word. You meant people like you. You meant the humiliation. You meant the threat of handcuffs. You just didn't mean to get caught." Back in the conference room, Xavier's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, a text from his sister. "CNN is picking up the story. Someone filmed the whole thing. It's going viral. Buckle up." Xavier closed his eyes. Of course someone had filmed it. Everyone had phones. He'd been so focused on staying calm, on maintaining his dignity, that he hadn't even thought about the fact that his humiliation was probably being recorded. "Mr. Coleman," Dawson's voice cut through his thoughts. "We'd like to offer you compensation for this incident. Full refund of your ticket, obviously. 20,000 airline miles. A voucher for..." "No," Xavier said quietly. Dawson blinked. "I'm sorry. I said no." Xavier stood up, his 6'2" frame suddenly seeming to fill the room. "You think you can hand me some miles and a voucher and make this go away? You think this is about money? Mr. Coleman, please, we're trying to make this right." "You can't make this right." Xavier's voice rose for the first time, months of accumulated frustrations finally breaking through. "You can fire Patricia Holbrook. You can give me 1,000,000 miles. But you can't give me back my dignity. You can't undo the fact that 20 people watched me get treated like a criminal and said nothing. You can't erase the moment when I had to call my sister, a decorated military officer, just to prove I belonged in a seat I'd paid for." The room went silent. Xavier took a breath, forcing himself back under control. "Here's what you're going to do. You're going to pull the records on every complaint filed against employees for discrimination in the past 5 years. Every single one. You're going to find out how many were dismissed, how many resulted in counseling, and how many people are still working for you who should have been fired years ago. Then you're going to implement actual consequences. Not training. Not workshops. Consequences." Jennifer Walsh was nodding, taking notes frantically. Dawson looked like he wanted to argue but couldn't find the words. The legal representative finally spoke up. "Mr. Coleman, what you're asking for would require a complete overhaul of our HR protocols. It would take months, maybe years." "Then you'd better start now," Xavier said flatly. "Because my sister, she's just getting started. And trust me, she has friends in places you really don't want to make enemies of." As if on cue, the door opened again. A new face, a woman in her late 50s with steel-gray hair and eyes that could cut glass. She wore a military bearing even in civilian clothes. "Xavier," Patricia Andrews said, her voice warm despite the fury radiating from her. Then she turned to the airline executives, and the warmth vanished. "Gentlemen, ladies, I believe we need to have a conversation about systemic failures and accountability." Dawson stood up so fast he almost knocked over his chair. "Major General Andrews, we're handling this situation." "Are you?" Patricia walked to the window, looking out at the shut-down concourse. "Because from where I'm standing, you're trying to contain a PR disaster. I'm here to discuss a civil rights violation." She pulled out her phone, scrolling through it. "I've spent the last 45 minutes on calls with the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, the Department of Transportation's Office of Aviation Consumer Protection, and 3 journalists from major publications. They're all very interested in this story. Major General, we don't want this to escalate." "It's already escalated," Patricia interrupted. "The moment your flight attendant told my brother that people like him don't belong in first class, this escalated. Now we're just deciding how far it goes." Xavier watched his sister work, a slight smile tugging at his lips despite everything. Patricia had always been a force of nature, the kid who'd stood up to bullies in their Detroit neighborhood, who'd fought her way through West Point when women were still fighting for basic respect, who'd commanded soldiers in 2 wars and never backed down from a fight she believed in. She'd taught him to stay calm under pressure, to think strategically, to pick his battles. But when someone came after her family, Patricia Andrews became a tactical missile in human form. "Here's what's going to happen," Patricia said, her voice quiet but absolute. "Every news outlet in America is going to run this story. A decorated Army officer, my brother, humiliated on your aircraft because a racist flight attendant decided he looked suspicious. The video is already at 2 million views on Twitter. By tomorrow, it'll be 10 million. Dawson's face went white. "Video? Oh yes. Crystal clear footage. Your flight attendant's face. Her voice. Every word. People like you try to sneak into first class all the time. It's all there." Jennifer Walsh looked like she might be sick. Patricia continued, relentless. "So here are your options. Option 1. You do exactly what my brother suggested. Pull every discrimination complaint. Fire every employee who should have been fired. Implement real consequences and real oversight. Make this airline a place where black passengers can board a plane without wondering if today's the day they get treated like criminals. You do that, and you do it publicly, and maybe, this story becomes about an airline that learned from its mistakes." "And option 2?" Dawson asked quietly. Patricia smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. Option 2. You try to sweep this under the rug. You fire Patricia Holbrook, call her a bad apple, throw some money at my brother, and hope this blows over. And then I make it my personal mission to ensure that every single person who's ever been discriminated against by your airline comes forward. I'll fund the lawsuits myself if I have to. I'll make sure this company becomes a case study in how not to treat passengers. Your stock price will tank. Your reputation will be destroyed. And I will sleep very well at night knowing I did it. The room was so quiet you could hear the air conditioning hum. Dawson looked at the legal representative, who shook his head slightly, a clear message that fighting this battle would be suicide. Major General Andrews, Dawson said carefully, I think we can work together on option 1. Good choice, Patricia said. She turned to Xavier. You okay, little brother? Xavier nodded. Yeah. I'm okay. No, you're not, Patricia said softly, and suddenly she wasn't the terrifying military officer anymore. She was just his big sister, the one who'd protected him from bullies, who'd helped him with homework, who'd cried at his commissioning ceremony. What happened to you was wrong. Deeply wrong. And you shouldn't have had to call me to fix it. Xavier felt something crack in his chest, the tight control he'd been maintaining since the moment Patricia Holbrook had sneered at him. I just wanted to go to Chicago, he said quietly. I just wanted to visit Mom for her birthday. Patricia pulled him into a hug. I know. And you will. But first, we're going to make sure this never happens to anyone else. Outside the conference room, the airport was still in chaos. Passengers were being rebooked. News crews were arriving. Security was reviewing footage from multiple angles. And in the cockpit of Flight 447, Captain Elena Carter was making a call of her own, to the airline CEO, a woman named Sarah Kellerman who was currently in a board meeting in Dallas. Sarah, it's Elena. We have a situation. A serious one. And you need to hear about it before the news breaks. 3 time zones away, Sarah Kellerman listened to Elena's report, her face growing darker with each sentence. Who is this passenger? Sarah asked finally. Xavier Coleman. Lieutenant Colonel. Army Reserve. Gold status flyer. And his sister is Major General Patricia Andrews, Sarah finished, her voice hollow. Oh my God. Elena, how bad is the video? Bad. Really bad. It's everything we train against. Everything we say we stand for. And it happened on my aircraft, Sarah. I feel like I failed. You didn't fail, Sarah interrupted. Your flight attendant failed. Our training failed. Our oversight failed. Elena, I want you to know, this ends today. No more second chances. No more counseling. If someone can't treat passengers with basic human dignity, they don't belong on our planes. What about the other complaints? Marcus said there were 3 more. Pull them all. Every complaint about Patricia Holbrook. Every complaint about any employee for discrimination. I want a full audit on my desk by Monday. And Elena, thank you for calling me. Thank you for giving me a chance to do the right thing before this explodes. It's already exploding, Elena said quietly. Twitter is on fire. CNN is setting up cameras outside. This is going to be a national story. Sarah was quiet for a long moment. Then we'd better make sure we're on the right side of it. Back in the terminal, Xavier's phone was ringing constantly. Reporters. Friends who'd seen the video. Fellow veterans offering support. His mother, crying on the phone, asking if he was okay. I'm fine, Mom, Xavier said, his voice gentle. I promise. Pat's here. She's handling it. That girl, his mother said, affection and exasperation mixing in her voice. Always fighting somebody's battle. This time it's my battle, Mom. But yeah, she's fighting it anyway. Jennifer Walsh approached hesitantly. Mr. Coleman, Captain Carter would like to speak with you. She's waiting at the gate. Xavier walked back to gate 23, aware of the stares from other passengers, the phone cameras pointed at him. The video had spread far enough that people were recognizing him now. Elena Carter stood by the window, still in her uniform, looking out at the tarmac. She turned when Xavier approached. Mr. Coleman, I owe you an apology. Xavier shook his head. You stopped it. You shut down the flight. You... I should have prevented it, Elena interrupted. Patricia Holbrook flew on my crew rotation for 6 months. I should have seen the signs. I should have caught this before it got to you. Captain Carter, you can't watch every crew member every second of every flight. No, Elena agreed. But I can create a culture where this behavior isn't tolerated. Where other flight attendants speak up when they see it. Where passengers feel safe. She looked at him directly. I've been flying for 23 years. I've seen progress. Real progress. But clearly not enough. Xavier was quiet for a moment. My father was a Tuskegee airman, he said finally. Did you know that? Elena shook her head. He told me stories about the racism he faced. Being denied service at restaurants. Being refused hotel rooms. Being treated like less than human even while he was risking his life for his country. Xavier looked out at the planes. He died 10 years ago. And you know what I thought today, standing in that aisle while your flight attendant humiliated me? I thought about how disappointed he'd be that I'm still fighting the same battles he fought 70 years ago. Elena's eyes were shining. Mr. Coleman. But then I thought about something else, Xavier continued. I thought about how proud he'd be that I didn't back down. That I made that call. That I stood my ground. He turned to Elena. So thank you, Captain Carter. For backing me up. For doing the right thing. It matters more than you know. Elena extended her hand again. This time, when Xavier shook it, it felt different. Not just professional courtesy, but mutual respect. Recognition of a shared commitment to justice. Flight 447 is being reassigned to another crew, Elena said. Patricia Holbrook has been escorted out of the airport. But I want to fly you to Chicago myself, Mr. Coleman. If you'll let me. Xavier smiled, the first real smile since this nightmare began. I'd be honored, Captain. Good. Give me 2 hours to get a new crew assembled. First class, seat 12A. And Mr. Coleman, you won't be alone. I'm upgrading every passenger who witnessed that incident and said nothing. They're going to sit in that cabin and think about their silence. Xavier laughed despite himself. That's actually perfect. As Elena walked away to coordinate the new flight, Patricia appeared at Xavier's side. CNN wants an interview, she said. So does MSNBC, Fox, ABC, and about 12 local stations. What do you want to do? Xavier thought about it. Thought about the video with 2 million views. Thought about all the other black passengers who'd been humiliated in silence. Thought about his father's stories and his own dignity and the power of speaking truth. Set up the interviews, he said. All of them. This story needs to be told. Patricia grinned. That's my brother. The sun was setting over the airport, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. The concourse was still shut down. Security was still investigating. And somewhere in America, millions of people were watching a video of Xavier Coleman being told he didn't belong in first class. But Xavier wasn't thinking about any of that anymore. He was thinking about the fact that he'd stood his ground. That he'd made the call. That he'd shut down an entire airport with nothing but the truth and the courage to speak it. And he was thinking about all the people who would see this story and know that they weren't alone. That racism on airplanes wasn't just a feeling or a misunderstanding. That it was real, and it was documented, and it had consequences. His phone buzzed one more time. A text from an unknown number. Mr. Coleman, this is Sarah Kellerman, CEO of the airline. I would like to meet with you personally to discuss how we move forward. Would you be available for a conversation tomorrow in Chicago? Xavier showed the text to Patricia. CEO wants to meet, he said. Patricia's eyes gleamed. Good. Because we have a list of demands, and she's going to hear every single one of them. As night fell over the airport, Xavier sat in the conference room with his sister, writing notes for the interviews, preparing to tell his story to the world. Outside, Flight 447 sat empty at the gate, a symbol of everything that had gone wrong. But tomorrow, Xavier would board a new flight. He'd sit in seat 12A. And he'd fly to Chicago with his head held high. Because he'd learned something today that his father had tried to teach him years ago. Dignity isn't given. It's claimed. And sometimes, claiming your dignity means making the call that shuts down the entire airport. Like this video if you think what Patricia Holbrook did was wrong. Because here's the truth. This isn't over. Not by a long shot. When a CEO starts making personal calls, when a major general starts making demands, when a story goes viral with millions of views, that's when real change begins. Only the people who think discrimination is acceptable would skip that like button. Don't be one of them. Xavier's fight is about to go national, and you won't believe what happens when he sits down with the media. The CNN studio lights were hot against Xavier's face, but he'd been through worse. Afghanistan in summer. Boardrooms full of hostile defense contractors. And yesterday, standing in that airplane aisle while Patricia Holbrook tried to erase his humanity with 4 words, "People like you." Anderson Cooper sat across from him, professional but clearly affected by the story. Behind the cameras, Patricia stood with her arms crossed, watching like a guardian angel in a business suit. They'd spent 3 hours that morning preparing for this moment. "Mr. Coleman," Anderson began, "millions of people have now seen the video of what happened to you on Flight 447. Can you walk us through what was going through your mind when the flight attendant told you to move to economy?" Xavier took a breath. They'd practiced this answer, but now that the moment was here, the emotions felt raw and immediate. "Anderson, my first thought was confusion. I had my boarding pass. I'd checked in properly. I'm a gold status member with this airline. I fly with them constantly for work. So my brain was trying to make sense of why I was being questioned." Xavier paused, choosing his words carefully. "But then she said it. People like you try to sneak into first class all the time." And in that moment, the confusion disappeared. "I knew exactly what was happening. I just hoped I'd never experience it so publicly." "You're a lieutenant colonel in the Army Reserve," Anderson said. "You've served your country. You've earned your success. What does it feel like to still be treated this way in 2025? Xavier felt his jaw tighten. "It feels like no matter what I accomplish, no matter how many degrees I earn or how many years I serve, there's always going to be someone who looks at my skin color first and my humanity second. My father was a Tuskegee airman. He fought Nazis abroad while fighting racism at home. And 80 years later, I'm on national television explaining why I should be allowed to sit in a seat I paid for. That's what it feels like, Anderson. Like we're running a race where the finish line keeps moving." The interview continued for another 20 minutes. Xavier talked about the other passengers' silence, about Captain Elena Carter's immediate response, about his sister's intervention. But mostly, he talked about dignity, how easy it is to take away, and how hard it is to reclaim. When the cameras finally stopped rolling, Anderson stood and shook Xavier's hand. "That was powerful. Really powerful. Thank you for sharing your story." "Thank you for giving me the platform," Xavier replied. Patricia approached as Anderson walked away. "You did well, little brother. Real good. Twitter is already exploding. #FlightWhileBlack is trending #1 worldwide." Xavier's phone had been buzzing throughout the interview. He pulled it out now, scrolling through hundreds of messages. Support from strangers. Stories from other black travelers who'd experienced similar incidents. Veterans offering solidarity. But also, predictably, the trolls and the skeptics. "You're playing the race card. She probably had a legitimate reason to question you. Another rich black man pretending to be a victim. Give me a break. Why are you making this into such a big deal? Just move to economy and stop causing problems." Xavier felt Patricia reading over his shoulder. Her hand landed on his arm, squeezing gently. "Don't read the comments. Not today. Let other people fight that battle." "Someone has to fight it," Xavier said quietly. "And someone is. Thousands of people. But you've done your part for today." Next up, ABC at 2, MSNBC at 4, and then the CEO meeting at 7. "Pace yourself." They left the CNN building and climbed into a black SUV that Patricia had arranged. The driver, a retired Army sergeant named Williams, caught Xavier's eye in the rearview mirror. "Saw the video, sir," Williams said. "Wanted you to know, you handled that with more grace than most people could have managed. Did your uniform proud." Xavier nodded his thanks, feeling something loosen in his chest. That's what he needed right now, not the anger of strangers on the internet, but the quiet support of people who understood. People who'd been there. The ABC interview was tougher. The journalist, a polished woman named Rebecca Torres, pushed harder on the details. "Mr. Coleman, some people are saying that the flight attendant may have had legitimate security concerns. That in today's climate, airline employees have to be vigilant. How do you respond to that?" Xavier had expected this question. It was the same deflection that always appeared when racism got caught on camera, the attempt to find a reasonable explanation for unreasonable behavior. "Rebecca, I'm going to be very clear about something," Xavier said, his voice steady but firm. "Security concerns are valid. If a passenger is behaving erratically, if they're intoxicated, if they're threatening, absolutely, flight attendants should intervene. But I did none of those things. I boarded calmly. I had my boarding pass ready. I was putting my bag in the overhead compartment when Patricia Holbrook decided I was suspicious. The only thing suspicious about me was my skin color. But how can you be certain it was about race?" Rebecca pressed. Xavier almost laughed. Almost. "Because she said it, Rebecca. People like you." She didn't say, "passengers like you," or "travelers like you." She said, "people like you." She was talking about black people. And when she said black people try to sneak into first class, as if we're criminals by default, she removed any doubt about her motivation. Rebecca shifted uncomfortably. The airline has stated that this was an isolated incident. It wasn't. Xavier cut her off, his patience fraying. Patricia Holbrook had 4 previous complaints for discriminatory behavior. 4. She should have been fired after the first one, but instead she got counseling and training. This airline knew they had a problem, and they chose to ignore it until it became a viral video. So no, this wasn't isolated. This was systemic failure with a very public consequence. The interview ended shortly after that. Rebecca thanked him professionally, but Xavier could tell she hadn't expected him to push back so directly. Good. He was done being the polite victim. Between interviews, Patricia took him to a quiet restaurant near O'Hare. They sat in a back booth, away from prying eyes, and Xavier finally let himself exhale. "How are you really doing?" Patricia asked, studying his face. "Tired. Angry. Frustrated that I have to keep explaining why racism is real to people who will never believe me anyway." He picked at his sandwich. "But also, I don't know. Hopeful, maybe. All these people reaching out, sharing their stories. It feels like something might actually change this time." Patricia's expression softened. "It might. But Xavier, you need to prepare yourself for the long fight. This CEO meeting tonight, it's not going to solve everything. Real change takes years, not days." "I know. And you need to take care of yourself. Don't let this consume you. Don't let your healing get buried under everyone else's expectations." Xavier looked at his sister, this woman who'd fought her way through West Point, who'd commanded troops in combat, who'd shattered glass ceilings and never looked back. "How did you do it, Pat? How did you keep going when people told you that you didn't belong?" Patricia was quiet for a long moment. "I surrounded myself with people who knew I did belong. I let go of trying to convince the people who were determined to doubt me. And I remembered that every barrier I broke made it easier for the women coming after me." She reached across the table, taking his hand. "You're breaking barriers right now, Xavier. Every person who sees your story and recognizes their own experience, you're making it easier for them to speak up. That matters." The MSNBC interview at 4 was with Joy Reid, and it felt different immediately. Joy, a black woman who'd covered countless stories of discrimination, didn't waste time with skepticism or devil's advocate questions. "Let's talk about what we're not talking about," Joy said, leaning forward. The silence. 20 passengers watched this happen, and only one spoke up, after the fact. "Why do you think that is?" Xavier felt himself relax slightly. Finally, someone asking the right questions. Because speaking up has consequences, he said. White passengers know that if they defend a black person being discriminated against, they might face hostility. They might be seen as causing problems. They might delay their own travel. So they make the calculation, consciously or not, that their comfort is more important than someone else's dignity. And that calculation is exactly what allows racism to thrive. You're putting responsibility on the bystanders, not just the perpetrator, Joy observed. Absolutely. Because Patricia Holbrook is one person with explicit racial bias. But those 20 silent passengers? They're the system that protects people like her. They're the reason this has happened 4 times before without consequences. Evil persists when good people choose convenience over courage. Joy nodded slowly. You've said you want systemic change from the airline. What does that look like specifically? Xavier pulled out his phone, reading from the notes he and Patricia had compiled. First, mandatory bias training isn't enough. We need accountability, meaning employees with multiple discrimination complaints get fired, not counseled. Second, we need independent oversight. A passenger advocacy board that reviews discrimination claims separately from internal HR. Third, we need transparency. Publish data on how many complaints you receive, how they're handled, and what the outcomes are. And fourth, he looked directly into the camera, we need the people who stay silent to understand that they're part of the problem. Speak up. Use your privilege to protect people who are being targeted. Be uncomfortable for 5 minutes if it means someone else doesn't have to be humiliated. When the interview ended, Joy came around the desk and hugged him. You're doing important work, she said quietly. Don't let them wear you down. By 6:30, Xavier was back at the hotel, exhausted but wired. The CEO meeting was in 30 minutes. Patricia sat across from him in the suite, reviewing their strategy one more time. Sarah Kellerman is smart, Patricia said. She's going to come with solutions. She's going to want to control the narrative. Our job is to make sure those solutions are real, not just PR. What if she offers me money to stay quiet? Xavier asked. Patricia's eyes hardened. Then we walk out. This isn't about money. This is about change. At 7 o'clock sharp, there was a knock on the door. Xavier opened it to find Sarah Kellerman standing there, a woman in her mid-50s with sharp eyes and an expression that suggested she hadn't slept much in the last 24 hours. She was accompanied by Jennifer Walsh and one other person, a black woman in her 30s carrying a leather portfolio. Mr. Coleman, Major General Andrews, Sarah said, extending her hand. Thank you for agreeing to meet. This is Jennifer Walsh, whom you've met, and Dr. Imani Foster, our newly appointed Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officer. Patricia raised an eyebrow. Newly appointed as of when? This morning, Dr. Foster said with a slight smile. Ms. Kellerman called me at 6 a.m. and asked if I wanted to help rebuild an airline's culture from the ground up. I said yes. They sat down around the suite's conference table. Sarah didn't waste time with small talk. Mr. Coleman, what happened to you was inexcusable. It was a failure at every level, individual, supervisory, and systemic. I'm not here to make excuses. I'm here to tell you what we're doing about it and to ask for your input on what else needs to happen. Xavier glanced at Patricia, who gave him a small nod. Go ahead. I'm listening, Xavier said. Sarah pulled out a tablet, bringing up a document. As of this morning, we've implemented several immediate changes. 1. Patricia Holbrook's employment has been terminated. She will not work for this airline or any of our partners again. 2. We've pulled every discrimination complaint filed in the last 5 years, all 237 of them. Dr. Foster and her team are reviewing each one to determine if appropriate action was taken. 237, Xavier repeated, the number landing like a punch. In 5 years. Yes, Sarah said quietly. And that's just the ones that were officially filed. We suspect there are many more that went unreported. Dr. Foster spoke up. Mr. Coleman, I've spent 15 years studying institutional racism in corporate America. What I found in my initial review of your airline is what I find everywhere. Good policies on paper, but weak enforcement. Training sessions that check boxes instead of changing minds. and a culture where employees learn they can engage in discriminatory behavior as long as they don't get caught on video. So what changes? Patricia asked bluntly. Because I've heard a lot of companies make promises after viral incidents. Most of them are empty. Sarah didn't flinch. Fair question. Here's what's changing, starting Monday. 1. Any employee with substantiated discrimination complaints, meaning complaints where evidence supports the claim, will face immediate termination. No more counseling. No more second chances. We're reviewing the 237 cases this weekend, and I expect several dozen terminations by Monday morning. Xavier felt something shift in his chest. That was real action. Sarah continued. 2. We're implementing an independent passenger advocacy board, exactly as you suggested in your MSNBC interview. The board will review all discrimination complaints separately from our HR department. It will have the authority to recommend policy changes and personnel actions directly to me. Who sits on this board? Patricia asked. We're working with the NAACP, the Council on American Islamic Relations, disability rights organizations, and LGBTQ advocacy groups to identify members. We want people who understand discrimination from lived experience, not just theory. 3, Sarah went on, we're publishing quarterly reports on discrimination complaints, how many we receive, how they're categorized, and what actions we take. Full transparency. The first report will cover the last 5 years retroactively. Dr. Foster added, and 4, the one I'm personally overseeing, we're completely redesigning our training program. No more one-day workshops where people sit through PowerPoint slides and forget everything by lunch. We're implementing year-round education, scenario-based training, and regular assessments. Employees who fail to demonstrate cultural competency will not fly. Xavier was quiet, processing. These were substantial changes. Real changes. But he'd learned to be skeptical of corporate promises. What's the catch? He asked. Sarah looked him directly in the eye. The catch is that this is going to be expensive, controversial, and hard. I'm going to face pushback from shareholders who think I'm overreacting. From employees who think I'm being too harsh. From passengers who think we're being too political. But Mr. Coleman, I watched that video of you standing in that aisle, and I was ashamed. Ashamed that my airline, the company I've dedicated 20 years of my life to building, treated you that way. So there's no catch. There's just the hard work of doing better. Patricia leaned forward. I want it in writing. Every change you just described. Signed by you and the board of directors, with specific timelines and accountability measures. You'll have it by Monday, Sarah said without hesitation. And I want monthly updates, Xavier added. Not through some PR department. Direct communication about what's being implemented and what's not working. Done. And when you find employees who should have been fired years ago but weren't, I want to know why. I want to understand exactly how your system failed so we can fix it. Sarah nodded slowly. That's going to be painful to document. Good, Xavier said flatly. It should be painful. Because what happened to me was painful. And every other passenger who filed a complaint and got ignored, that was painful too. So yes, you're going to have to sit with that discomfort. The room was quiet for a moment. Then Sarah extended her hand again. Mr. Coleman, I can't give you back what Patricia Holbrook took from you. But I can promise you that your experience will lead to change. Real, measurable, lasting change. And I can promise that I will personally ensure we follow through. Xavier shook her hand. I'm going to hold you to that. After Sarah, Jennifer, and Dr. Foster left, Xavier collapsed onto the couch. Patricia sat beside him, neither of them speaking for a long moment. Do you believe her? Xavier finally asked. I believe she's scared, Patricia said thoughtfully. Scared of lawsuits, scared of bad press, scared of losing customers. But scared CEOs sometimes make real changes, because they know their survival depends on it. Xavier's phone buzzed. Another message, but this one made him smile. It was from Captain Elena Carter. Mr. Coleman, I wanted you to know, 15 flight attendants have come forward in the last 24 hours with stories of witnessing discrimination by colleagues. They stayed silent before because they thought no one would listen. You made them believe someone would. Thank you for that. Xavier showed the message to Patricia. See, she said softly. You're already changing things. 15 people who saw something and said nothing, Xavier replied. Until now. Better late than never. Xavier wasn't sure he agreed, but he was too tired to argue. He'd done 3 major interviews, negotiated with a CEO, and relived the worst moment of his week over and over again for millions of strangers. Tomorrow, he'd visit his mother like he'd originally planned. He'd try to return to something resembling normal life. But tonight, he just wanted to close his eyes and not think about airplane aisles or viral videos or the weight of being a symbol. His phone buzzed one more time. A text from an unknown number. Mr. Coleman, my name is Marcus Johnson. 5 years ago, I was removed from a flight by the same attendant who targeted you. I filed a complaint. Nothing happened. I stopped flying with that airline and never told anyone because I was embarrassed. But watching you stand up gave me courage. I'm filing a lawsuit tomorrow. Thank you for fighting. Xavier read the message twice, then handed his phone to Patricia. She read it and wiped her eyes. This is why we fight, she said. Not for the people who already have power. For the ones who thought they were alone. Xavier thought about Marcus Johnson, a man he'd never met, carrying shame for 5 years because an airline chose protecting their employee over protecting their passenger. He thought about the 237 complaints. About all the people who didn't file complaints because they didn't think it would matter. And he thought about his father, who'd flown combat missions while being denied basic human dignity, who'd fought for a country that didn't always fight for him, who'd taught Xavier that courage isn't about never being afraid, it's about standing up anyway. Dad would have been proud, Xavier said quietly. Patricia took his hand. Dad would have been furious. But yes, then proud. They sat together in the hotel suite, brother and sister, veteran and veteran, watching the Chicago skyline light up against the night sky. Tomorrow, the fight would continue. The interviews, the meetings, the slow grind of systemic change. But tonight, Xavier let himself feel what he hadn't allowed himself to feel in that airplane aisle. He mattered. His dignity mattered. And he'd made damn sure everyone knew it. Subscribe if you believe in holding powerful companies accountable. Xavier's mother lived in a modest brick house in Hyde Park, the same house where he and Patricia had grown up, the same house where their father had told stories of flying over Europe while America told him he wasn't equal. The morning sun filtered through the lace curtains in the living room, curtains that had been there for 30 years, yellowed but still beautiful. Dorothy Coleman sat in her favorite armchair, the one their father had bought her for their 25th anniversary. At 73, she was still sharp, still observant, still the woman who'd held their family together through deployments and discrimination and everything in between. So, she said, pouring tea into delicate china cups, my son is famous now. Xavier winced. Mom, I didn't want to be famous. I just wanted to. I know what you wanted, Dorothy interrupted gently. You wanted to come visit your old mother for her birthday without being treated like a criminal. Basic dignity. Same thing your father wanted every day of his life. She handed him the tea. But that's not how the world works for people who look like us. You know that. Xavier sipped the tea, letting the warmth spread through him. He'd barely slept. The hotel bed had been comfortable, but his mind kept replaying the confrontation, the interviews, the weight of 237 complaints. I keep thinking about all the other people, Xavier said quietly. All the passengers who experienced what I did, but didn't have a sister who's a major general. Didn't have connections. Didn't have the energy to fight. Dorothy set down her teacup, studying her son with eyes that had seen too much but still held hope. Let me tell you something your father told me once. We were in Alabama, 1952. He was trying to buy a car, had cash in hand, ready to pay. Salesman took one look at him in his uniform and said the car wasn't for sale. Your father could have walked away. Could have stayed quiet. But instead, he called the owner of the dealership, who happened to be a veteran too. That owner came down, fired the salesman on the spot, and sold your father the car with an apology. I never heard that story, Xavier said. Because your father didn't like talking about it. He said the sad part wasn't the racist salesman, there would always be men like that. The sad part was that he needed to call in favors and pull rank just to be treated like a paying customer. Dorothy leaned forward. But here's what he told me that night. That I didn't fight that battle for me. I fought it for the next black man who walks into that dealership. Maybe he won't have to make a phone call. Xavier felt something crack in his chest, the same feeling he'd had when Patricia hugged him, when Captain Carter had stood up for him, when Marcus Johnson's text had come through. You think I did the right thing? He asked. Going public? The interviews. Baby, I think you did the only thing you could do and still look at yourself in the mirror. Dorothy picked up her teacup again. But I also think you need to be careful. When you become the face of something bigger than yourself, people start expecting you to be perfect. They start looking for reasons to tear you down. As if on cue, Xavier's phone buzzed. He'd been ignoring it all morning, but his mother's knowing look made him check it. A text from Dr. Imani Foster, the airline's new Chief Diversity Officer. Mr. Coleman, we've completed our review of the 237 complaints. 68 employees should have been terminated. 68. Some had 5+ complaints each. The system didn't just fail, it was designed to protect perpetrators over passengers. We're announcing the terminations Monday. Wanted you to know first. Xavier showed his mother the message. She read it twice, her expression darkening. 68 people, she said slowly. 68 people who kept their jobs while passengers suffered. And that's just one airline, Xavier. Just one. I know, Mom. Do you? Dorothy's voice sharpened. Because, baby, what you've started, this isn't going to end with one airline fixing their problems. Every black person who's ever been discriminated against on a plane, in a hotel, in a restaurant, they're all watching you now. They're all wondering if speaking up will finally matter. Xavier felt the weight of it settling on his shoulders. I can't fix everything, Mom. I'm not asking you to fix everything. I'm asking you to pace yourself. Your father spent 40 years fighting these battles. He won some, lost more, and it wore him down. I watched it happen. Dorothy's eyes misted. He died angry, Xavier. Angry that the world hadn't changed as much as he'd hoped. I don't want that for you. Before Xavier could respond, the doorbell rang. Patricia appeared in the doorway, having let herself in with her key. Behind her stood Captain Elena Carter, looking uncomfortable in civilian clothes, jeans and a sweater that somehow still couldn't hide her military bearing. Captain Carter wanted to speak with you, Patricia said. I hope that's okay. Dorothy stood immediately, straightening her dress. Of course. Any friend of my children is welcome here. Would you like some tea, Captain? Please, call me Elena. And yes, thank you, Mrs. Coleman. They settled in the living room, the four of them, an unlikely assembly bound together by one viral moment. Elena set down her teacup carefully. Mr. Coleman, I came because I wanted you to know what's happening inside the airline. It's chaos. Good chaos, I think, but chaos nonetheless. What do you mean? Xavier asked. The CEO's announcement about the terminations leaked early. 68 employees and their union representatives are threatening lawsuits. They're saying they're being made scapegoats for systemic issues. Elena's expression hardened. They're not wrong about it being systemic. But they're damn wrong about being scapegoats. Every single one of those 68 had multiple substantiated complaints. They knew what they were doing. Patricia leaned forward. Will the airline back down? Sarah Kellerman says no. She held an all-hands meeting this morning. I was there. She said, and I quote, "We have a choice. We can protect employees who discriminate, or we can protect the passengers they victimize. We can't do both. I choose passengers." Elena smiled slightly. Half the room applauded. The other half looked like they'd been slapped. The half that looked slapped, Xavier said quietly, they're the ones who've been getting away with it too. Exactly. Elena pulled out her phone, scrolling through something. I've received 43 messages in the last 2 days from flight attendants. Most are supportive, thanking me for standing up, sharing their own stories of witnessing discrimination. But some—" She hesitated. "Some are angry. They say I betrayed the crew by siding with a passenger. They say I made them all look bad." Dorothy Coleman's voice cut through the tension. "Captain Carter, may I ask you something?" "Of course, Mrs. Coleman. When you shut down that flight, when you ordered everyone off your plane, did you know it would cause all this? Did you know it would become national news?" Elena was quiet for a long moment. "No, ma'am. I just knew that what I'd witnessed was wrong. Fundamentally wrong. And I knew that if I didn't act immediately, Mr. Coleman would have been forced off that plane while everyone watched and pretended it wasn't happening." "So you did what was right, not what was easy," Dorothy said. "Yes, ma'am." "Then don't you dare apologize for it." Dorothy's voice carried the weight of 73 years of living while black in America. "Don't you dare let anyone make you feel guilty for having a conscience." Xavier watched his mother, this woman who'd raised 2 children while their father deployed, who'd fought the school system to get Patricia into advanced classes, who'd taught them both that dignity wasn't negotiable. She'd never made headlines, never given interviews, but she'd been fighting these battles her entire life. "Mom," Xavier said softly, "I want to keep going. The interviews, the advocacy work." Dr. Foster asked if I'd be willing to consult on their new training program. "The NAACP wants me to speak at their convention." "But you need to do it." "I know it's a lot," Dorothy finished. "I know, baby. I raised you and your sister to stand up. Can't be mad when you actually do it." She reached over, taking his hand. "Just promise me something. Promise me you'll remember that you're human. That it's okay to be tired. That it's okay to say no sometimes." Xavier squeezed her hand. "I promise." Patricia's phone rang. She glanced at it, and her expression changed. "It's Sarah Kellerman. She's asking if we can do a video call. Says it's urgent." They set up Patricia's laptop on the coffee table. Sarah Kellerman appeared on screen, looking exhausted but determined. Behind her, Dr. Foster and several other executives sat around a conference table. "Major General Andrews, Mr. Coleman, I apologize for interrupting your family time. But something's happened that you need to know about immediately." Sarah took a breath. "Marcus Johnson, the passenger who texted you last night, his story is breaking on every major news outlet. But he's not alone. Since he came forward, we've received contact from 47 additional passengers. 47 people with similar experiences, many involving the same employees." Xavier felt his stomach drop. 47. "And counting," Dr. Foster added. "Mr. Coleman, you've opened a floodgate. People who stayed silent for years are finally speaking up." Sarah continued, "We're facing a potential class action lawsuit. Our legal team is preparing for significant financial exposure. But more than that, we're facing a moral reckoning. Every one of those 47 stories represents a failure, not just by individual employees, but by every manager, every supervisor, every executive who saw the warning signs and looked away." Xavier glanced at his mother, who was listening intently. Then at Patricia, whose expression had shifted into strategic mode. Then at Elena, who looked like she was watching her airline's reputation crumble in real time. "What do you want from me?" Xavier asked. Sarah met his eyes through the screen. "I want your help making this right. Not as PR. Not as damage control. But as someone who understands what these passengers experienced. Dr. Foster is building a victim advocacy program, counseling, compensation, formal apologies. We want you to help shape it." "Why should I help you?" Xavier asked bluntly. "You had 68 employees who should have been fired years ago. You had 237 complaints that were ignored. Why should I believe you're interested in anything beyond protecting your bottom line?" The silence on the video call stretched out. Then Sarah did something Xavier didn't expect. She removed her CEO mask. "You shouldn't believe me," Sarah said, her voice cracking slightly. "You have every reason to distrust me and this company. We failed. Catastrophically. And nothing I say will change that." She paused. "But those 47 people who just came forward? They're coming forward because they saw you stand up. They believe, maybe for the first time, that speaking up might actually matter. So I'm not asking you to trust me. I'm asking you to help them. Xavier looked at his mother. Dorothy nodded once, not permission, but acknowledgement that the choice was his. I'll help, Xavier said. But on one condition. Every single one of those 47 passengers gets a personal apology from you. Not from a PR department. From you, Sarah Coleman, CEO. Face-to-face or video call. And you listen to their stories. All of them. Every painful detail. Sarah's eyes widened. 47 personal meetings would take weeks. Done, she said without hesitation. I'll clear my schedule. After the call ended, the four of them sat in Dorothy Coleman's living room, processing what had just happened. 47 people, Elena said quietly. 47. And those are just the ones brave enough to come forward. Patricia stood, walking to the window. This is bigger than one airline now. Every company is watching. Every CEO is wondering if they're next. Xavier felt his phone buzz again. And again. And again. Messages flooding in, reporters, advocacy groups, other passengers wanting to share their stories. His mother's hand landed on his shoulder. Baby, you need to eat something. Rest. The world can wait an hour. But could it? Xavier looked at the messages, each one representing a person who'd been hurt, humiliated, dismissed. People who'd waited years for someone to listen. Mom's right, Patricia said firmly. We eat. We rest. Then we strategize. You can't help anyone if you burn out in week one. As Dorothy headed to the kitchen to prepare lunch, Xavier caught his reflection in the window. He looked tired. Older than 42. But also, maybe, like someone who'd found his purpose. His phone lit up one more time. A message from Marcus Johnson. Thank you for giving me my voice back. Xavier closed his eyes, letting those words sink in. His father had fought so the next generation wouldn't have to. But the fight wasn't over. Maybe it never would be. So Xavier would keep fighting. Not alone, never alone, but surrounded by his sister, his mother, allies like Elena, and 47 strangers who were strangers no more. The battle had just begun. And this time, they were going to win. Like this video if you believe every single one of those 47 passengers deserves justice. Because here's what the airline doesn't want you to know. 68 employees with multiple complaints kept their jobs for years. Years. While passengers suffered in silence. While people like Xavier got humiliated and told to just accept it. Only people who benefit from broken systems would skip that like button. 3 months later, Xavier stood in the main terminal of the same airport where his nightmare had begun. But today was different. Today, the airport wasn't shutting down because of chaos. It was shutting down because of ceremony. The entire concourse had been transformed. Where angry passengers had once crowded around departure boards, now stood a diverse gathering of people. Airline employees, civil rights leaders, journalists, and 47 passengers whose stories had changed an industry. Xavier adjusted his tie, feeling the weight of the moment. Beside him, Patricia squeezed his arm. You ready for this? Not even a little bit, Xavier admitted. On a temporary stage near Gate 23, the same gate where Patricia Holbrook had tried to erase his humanity, Sarah Coleman stood at a podium. Behind her, a massive banner read, The Dignity Initiative, 90 Days of Transformation. The airport PA system crackled to life. Ladies and gentlemen, we're about to begin a very special ceremony. We ask that all passengers and staff in Concourse C join us for this historic moment. Xavier watched as people gathered. Some he recognized, Elena Carter in her crisp pilot's uniform, Dr. Imani Foster with her ever-present portfolio, Marcus Johnson whose lawsuit had opened the floodgates. But most were strangers who'd stopped their hurried travel to witness something unprecedented. Sarah stepped to the microphone. Her voice echoed through the terminal, clear and unwavering. 3 months ago, a decorated Army officer named Xavier Coleman was humiliated on one of our aircraft. A flight attendant looked at him and decided he didn't belong in first class. Not because of anything he did, but because of who he was. A black man in a space she believed he didn't deserve. The terminal was silent. Xavier could hear his own heartbeat. When that video went viral, Sarah continued, many companies would have fired the employee, issued an apology, and hoped the story would fade. We almost did exactly that. But Mr. Coleman and his family refused to let us take the easy way out. They demanded accountability, transparency, real change. Sarah gestured to the screens mounted throughout the terminal. They lit up with data, charts, graphs, numbers that told a devastating story. 68 employees terminated for substantiated discrimination complaints. 237 complaints reviewed. 47 additional passengers who came forward with their own experiences of racism, Islamophobia, homophobia, and disability discrimination on our flights. Sarah's voice cracked slightly. These aren't just numbers. These are human beings who trusted us to get them safely to their destinations, and we failed them. Completely. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Some airline employees looked uncomfortable. Others nodded in agreement. But today, Sarah said, her voice strengthening, we're not here to talk about failure. We're here to talk about what we've built from those failures. Dr. Imani Foster stepped forward, taking the microphone. 90 days ago, I was brought in to overhaul this airline's approach to diversity and inclusion. I've spent my career studying systemic racism in corporations, and I'll be honest, I didn't think real change was possible in 3 months. I thought we'd be fighting bureaucracy, resistance, and half-measures. Imani looked directly at Xavier. But Mr. Coleman taught us something. He taught us that accountability isn't optional. That transparency isn't a PR strategy, it's a moral imperative. And that real change happens when powerful people are willing to admit they were wrong. The screens changed, showing new data. This time, the numbers told a different story. 100% of our 18,000 employees have completed new anti-discrimination training, not a one-day workshop, but a comprehensive program with ongoing assessments. We've established an independent passenger advocacy board with the power to investigate complaints and recommend terminations. We've published our first transparency report, available to anyone who wants to read it. And we've created a victim support program that has already provided counseling, compensation, and formal apologies to every passenger who came forward. The crowd began to applaud, but Imani held up her hand. Don't applaud yet. Because here's the truth, we're not done. We'll never be done. Dismantling systemic racism isn't a project with an end date. It's a commitment that has to be renewed every single day. Elena Carter stepped forward next. Xavier hadn't known she'd be speaking, and from the emotion on her face, this was personal. I'm Captain Elena Carter. 3 months ago, I shut down Flight 447 because I witnessed discrimination that I couldn't ignore. In the days after, some of my colleagues called me a traitor. They said I'd made all airline employees look bad. They said I should have handled it quietly. Elena's jaw tightened. But here's what I learned. Staying quiet isn't neutral. When we witness injustice and say nothing, we're choosing the side of the oppressor. Every single time. And I'm done choosing comfort over courage. The applause this time was thunderous. Xavier felt tears stinging his eyes. Since Mr. Coleman's incident became public, Elena continued, 143 airline employees across multiple carriers have come forward with stories of witnessing discrimination by colleagues. 143 people who stayed silent before because they didn't think speaking up would matter. They're speaking up now. And we're listening. Sarah returned to the microphone. Mr. Coleman, would you join me up here, please? Xavier's stomach dropped. He hadn't prepared a speech. Hadn't expected to speak at all. Patricia gave him a gentle push, and suddenly he was walking toward the stage, aware of hundreds of eyes on him. Sarah handed him the microphone. Xavier looked out at the crowd, at Marcus Johnson, who'd found the courage to file his lawsuit, at the elderly white woman from Seat 12C who'd called the incident disgraceful, at Captain Carter, who'd chosen conscience over convenience, at his mother, who'd traveled from Hyde Park to witness this moment, at Patricia, whose one phone call had shut down this airport and started a revolution. I didn't want to be here, Xavier said, his voice quiet but carrying through the terminal. 3 months ago, I just wanted to visit my mother for her birthday. I wanted to sit in the seat I'd paid for and read my book and maybe sleep a little. Simple things. Human things. He paused, gathering his thoughts. But Patricia Holbrook looked at me and saw a threat. She saw someone who didn't belong. And in that moment, she had a choice, She could see my humanity, or she could see my skin color. She chose skin color. And for a few minutes in that airplane aisle, I felt invisible. Not as a person, but as a problem to be removed. Xavier's voice grew stronger. What I've learned in these 3 months is that I'm not alone. Every single one of the 47 passengers who came forward has that same story. The moment someone looked at them and decided they didn't belong. The moment they became invisible. He turned to Sarah. You asked me to help build something better. I said yes because I believe people can change. I believe systems can change. But I also believe that change only happens when the cost of staying the same becomes too high. Xavier looked directly at the camera crews recording this moment. To every person watching this who's ever been discriminated against, in an airplane, a restaurant, a store, anywhere, I want you to know, your dignity matters. Your humanity matters. And you don't need to be a lieutenant colonel with a sister who's a major general to deserve basic respect. You deserve it simply because you exist. The terminal erupted in applause. Xavier saw people crying, not just the passengers who'd come forward, but strangers who recognized themselves in his story. Sarah stepped forward, holding a plaque. Mr. Coleman, on behalf of our airline and our 18,000 employees, I present you with the first-ever Dignity Champion Award. But more than that, I present you with a promise. Gate 23, where your incident occurred, is being permanently renamed the Coleman Dignity Gate. Every passenger who walks through here will see your name and remember that one person's courage can change everything. Xavier stared at the plaque, then at the gate behind him. Workers were already installing a new sign, Gate 23, Coleman Dignity Gate. I don't know what to say, Xavier admitted. You don't have to say anything, Sarah replied. You've already said enough. You've already done enough. Now let us carry the work forward. Patricia joined him on stage, wrapping her arm around his shoulders. Then Dorothy, moving slowly but with fierce pride. Then Marcus Johnson. Then Elena Carter. Then, one by one, all 47 passengers who'd found their voices because Xavier had found his. They stood together on that stage, a living monument to the power of speaking truth to power. Sarah took the microphone one final time. Today, we're suspending all flights in Concourse C for 1 hour. Not as punishment, but as reflection. Every employee, every passenger, everyone in this airport, we're asking you to think about the world you want to live in. A world where people are invisible, or a world where everyone's dignity is sacred. Mr. Coleman, I'm a flight attendant for a different airline. I just watched the ceremony. Yesterday, I witnessed a colleague make an Islamophobic comment to a passenger. I stayed quiet because I was scared. Not anymore. I'm filing a report today. Thank you for showing me what courage looks like. Then another message. I was removed from a bus last year for looking suspicious. I never reported it because I didn't think anyone would care. Watching you made me realize my story matters too. Filing a complaint tomorrow. And another. My daughter has a disability. She's been denied boarding twice because airlines said she was disruptive. She wasn't. She was just disabled. We're hiring a lawyer. Thank you for fighting. Xavier showed the messages to Patricia. She read them, tears streaming down her face. This is what Dad fought for, she whispered. Not perfection, but progress. One brave person inspiring another. The hour passed. Gradually, the terminal returned to normal operations. Passengers boarded flights. Announcements echoed through the concourse. Life continued. But something had shifted. Something fundamental. Xavier stood at the window near Gate 23, Coleman Dignity Gate, watching planes take off into the cloudy sky. Beside him, his mother hummed softly, the same song she'd hummed when he was a child afraid of the dark. You did good, baby, Dorothy said. Your father would be so proud. Xavier thought about his father. About the Tuskegee airmen who'd fought Nazis abroad while fighting racism at home. About the generations of black people who'd endured humiliation so their children might not have to. About the long, exhausting, necessary work of demanding to be seen as human. I'm tired, Mom, Xavier admitted. I know. But tired isn't the same as done. Dorothy took his hand. Rest when you need to. But don't stop. Because every time you speak up, you give someone else permission to do the same. As they walked toward the exit, Xavier passed a young black man in a business suit, heading toward security. The man stopped, recognition flashing across his face. "Mr. Coleman, I just wanted to say," he paused, emotion catching in his throat. "I fly every week for work. Every single time. I wonder if today's the day someone decides I don't belong. Watching you fight back. It meant everything. So thank you." Xavier shook his hand. "What's your name?" "James. James Wilson." "Well, James Wilson, next time someone tries to tell you that you don't belong, remember that you do. Always." James nodded, blinking back tears, and headed toward his gate. Patricia appeared at Xavier's side. "You know what's funny? Patricia Holbrook tried to make you invisible. Instead, she made you unforgettable." Xavier smiled. Commas got a sense of humor. They walked out of the airport together, Xavier, Patricia, and Dorothy Coleman. Behind them, Gate 23 gleamed with its new name. Above them, planes carried passengers to destinations across the country, including some who'd been trained in the last 90 days to see humanity first and everything else second. The fight wasn't over. It would never be over. But today, in this airport, in this moment, dignity had won. And Xavier Coleman, the black man who'd been denied first class, who'd made one call and shut down an airport, had helped build something that would outlast them all. A world where everyone belonged. Subscribe if you believe dignity isn't negotiable. Because Xavier's story started with one viral moment, but it ended with systematic change across an entire industry. 68 employees terminated. 237 complaints reviewed. 47 voices amplified. 1 airport gate renamed. And countless passengers who will now be treated with the respect they deserved all along. This is what real accountability looks like. This is what happens when one person refuses to stay silent. Hit that subscribe button if you're ready to stand up the next time you witness injustice. Because the next Xavier Coleman might be sitting right next to you, waiting for someone, anyone, to speak up. Don't let them wait in silence.